Listen to me carefully. Are you tired of being the man who gives everything and receives crumbs, tired of watching her eyes light up for everyone except you? Tired of being the safe choice, the backup plan, the emotional crutch she leans on while dreaming of someone else? Then you need to hear what I'm about to tell you, because what I'm going to reveal will shatter every romantic illusion you've ever held, and that shattering will be your salvation. You see, there's a terrible truth hiding behind every bouquet of roses, every expensive dinner, every carefully planned surprise, a truth so ugly that our entire culture conspires to keep you from seeing it. The truth is this: modern romance isn't love, it's exploitation. It's a system designed to extract your resources, your time, your dignity, and your soul while convincing you that your slavery is actually nobility. You've been living inside a lie so massive, so pervasive that questioning it feels like questioning gravity itself. But I'm going to show you the architecture of this deception. I'm going to show you how they turned your deepest need for connection into their most profitable market, and once you see it, you can never unsee it. Let me tell you what emotional suffering really means for a man. It's not just heartbreak. Heartbreak is clean, honest, temporary. What I'm talking about is something far more insidious. It's the slow poison of emotional dependency, disguised as love. It's the gradual erosion of your identity until you exist only as a function of her moods, her needs, her approval. It's becoming a ghost haunting your own life forever, seeking validation from someone who has already decided you're not worth validating. Real emotional suffering is when you mistake the drug for the medicine, when you confuse the addiction with affection, when you believe that the intensity of your need proves the depth of your love. But here's what they never told you: genuine love doesn't create dependency, it creates freedom. Manipulation creates dependency, and what our culture calls romance is manipulation wrapped in poetry. Think about it. What is this thing we call romantic love? This desperate theater of grand gestures and emotional performances. Arthur Schopenhauer saw through it too. Centuries ago, he understood that what we mistake for love is nothing more than the will to live disguising itself, tricking us into reproduction by making us believe we've found our soulmate. The species needs to continue, so it creates an illusion so powerful that rational men will bankrupt themselves chasing it. But Schopenhauer only saw half the picture. Yes, biology tricks us, but culture weaponizes that trick. What started as nature's reproductive strategy became civilization's control mechanism. The modern romance industry isn't about love, it's about converting masculine energy into consumable products. Every culture needs its creation myths, and ours is the myth of romantic love. We tell ourselves that somewhere out there is the one, that special person who will complete us, validate us, make our lives meaningful. And to prove ourselves worthy of this mythical completion, we must perform increasingly elaborate rituals of devotion. We must spend, sacrifice, and surrender until we have nothing left but the hope that our emptiness will be rewarded with acceptance. This isn't how it always was. For most of human history, attraction followed a different pattern entirely. Women were drawn to power, real power, kings, warriors, successful merchants, men who commanded resources, territory, respect. Take Solomon, the biblical king. He didn't need to plan romantic dinners or write Love letters, power was his language of. Attraction, resources were his poetry. When you control kingdoms, you don't chase, you choose, but something shifted. In medieval Europe, the rise of courtly love, the troubadour tradition, the cult of romantic chivalry, suddenly landless. Knights were writing songs about unrequited longing, men without real power began creating an alternative currency, emotional labor. If they couldn't offer kingdoms, they would offer their souls. If they couldn't provide territory, they would provide endless devotion. Nietzsche would have recognized this immediately as resentment, the resentment of the powerless transformed into a new moral system the weak couldn't compete with the strong on terms of actual strength. So they created a game where weakness became virtue, where neediness became romance, where financial inadequacy became true love that transcends material things, and thus was born the greatest psychological con job in human history. Fast forward to today, and this con job has become $1 trillion industry. Romance is no longer about human connection, it's about market positioning. You've become a consumer in the economy of artificial scarcity. They've taken something that should be abundant, affection, companionship, physical intimacy, and created an elaborate system to make it scarce, precious, and expensive. Think about how this works. A woman's attention becomes a commodity, her smile, her touch, her approval, all transformed into products that must be purchased with your time, money, and dignity. You take her to expensive restaurants not because the food creates intimacy, but because the expense signals your willingness to sacrifice for her attention. You buy jewelry not because metal and stones have magical properties, but because the cost proves your commitment to the economic relationship you've entered. Karl Marx wrote about the alienation of labor under capitalism, but he never imagined how thoroughly human affection would be commodified. You're not just selling your labor to buy her gifts. You're selling your authentic self to purchase a performance of love. She's not just receiving your resources, she's selling you access to her emotional availability. Both of you become alienated from the actual experience of connection, trapped instead in an endless marketplace of symbolic exchanges. And oh, how the industries profit from your desperation. The restaurant industry that charges triple prices for romantic dinners, the jewelry companies that invented entire holidays to sell you overpriced rocks, the vacation industry that sells you romantic getaways to places designed to empty your wallet while promising to fill your heart, the flower industry that turned dying plants into symbols of undying love. Every Valentine's Day, every anniversary, every special occasion becomes another opportunity to tax your devotion. They've turned your love into their profit center, and they've convinced you that refusing to pay makes you a bad boyfriend, a cheap date, an unromantic man. But here's the psychological trap within the trap. These gestures don't actually create the love they promise, they create dependency. She becomes addicted to the hit of validation that comes from being pursued, courted, chosen. You become addicted to the brief moments of approval that follow your grand gesture. Neither of you is experiencing authentic connection. You're both trapped in a behavioral loop that profits everyone except you. This is what Jean Baudrillard meant when he wrote about simulacra copies without originals. Modern romance is a simulation of love, a copy of something that may never have existed in the first place. You're not experiencing real intimacy. You're performing an idea of intimacy that you learned from movies, songs, and advertisements created by people who profit from your performance. And like any addiction, it requires escalating doses. The dinner that impressed her last month is now the baseline. The gift that made her eyes light up becomes the new minimum standard. You find yourself trapped in an endless cycle of escalation, always needing to do more, spend more, sacrifice more just to maintain the same level of her interest that you used to get for free. You become Sisyphus, the mythological king condemned to push a boulder up a mountain for eternity. Every romantic gesture is that boulder. Every time you think you finally reach the summit of her affection, the boulder rolls back down and you must begin again. The reservation at the better restaurant, the more expensive jewelry, the more elaborate vacation, the more creative surprise, push, climb, achieve temporary approval, watch it fade, repeat forever. Albert Camus said that we must imagine Sisyphus happy, finding meaning in the struggle itself. But you're not Sisyphus. You're not condemned by the gods. You're volunteering for this prison, and the only thing keeping you there is your belief that the boulder will someday stay at the top of the mountain. Here's what this does to your psychology. You begin to measure your worth entirely through your capacity to provide experiences, gifts, and emotional labor. Your value as a man becomes tied to your utility as a romantic service provider. You lose touch with who you are when you're not performing for her approval. You forget what you enjoyed before you started structuring every decision around her preferences. You become hollow, a shell of a man filled only with the anxiety of maintaining your romantic performance. And what does this do to her? It trains her to measure love through what she receives rather than what she feels. It conditions her to see relationships as transactions where her attention is the product and your resources are the payment. She begins to confuse the high of being pursued with the depth of being loved. She becomes addicted to the validation of being chosen, courted, celebrated, but she never learns to generate her own sense of worth or to love without being entertained. Both of you become prisoners. You become enslaved to her approval. She becomes enslaved to your performance. Neither of you is free to simply be, to connect authentically, to discover what you might actually enjoy together without the mediating layer of romantic theater. This is the double bind that destroys modern relationships. You feel used because you're constantly giving without receiving equivalent investment. She feels objectified because she's constantly being courted for her approval rather than known for who she is. Both of you are participating in a system that prevents the very connection you're trying to create. If you resonated with this message and want to delve deeper, check out the ebooks and other powerful resources that expand on everything we've covered on this channel. You'll find the links in the description and in the pinned comment. But there's something even darker underneath this surface level dysfunction. The entire romantic system functions as a massive psychological test that most men are designed to fail. Every romantic expectation is actually loyalty test disguised as love. Every time she withdraws affection until you chase her, that's a test. Every time she creates drama and waits to see if you'll calm her down, that's a test. Every time she hints at what she wants instead of directly asking, that's a test. And Here's the cruel truth. These tests are not designed to help her find love. They're designed to establish dominance, to train you to prioritize her emotional states over your own stability, to condition you to accept responsibility for her feelings while surrendering authority over your own life. When she gives you the silent treatment, she's not processing hurt feelings, she's training you to fear her withdrawal of attention. When she creates artificial urgency around romantic gestures, she's not expressing her love language, she's establishing that your time, money, and energy are available on demand. When she punishes you with emotional distance for failing to read her mind, she's not teaching you to be a better partner. She's teaching you that your peace of mind is conditional on her approval. Most men never recognize these patterns because they've been taught that questioning a woman's emotional needs makes them insensitive, selfish, or immature. But emotional needs and emotional manipulation are not the same thing. A genuine need can be communicated directly and met through mutual cooperation. Manipulation requires confusion, guilt, and the threat of withdrawal to function. Let me paint you a picture that might feel familiar. There's a man I knew who spent 3 years of his life in what he believed was a loving relationship. Every Friday, he would plan elaborate dates. Every month, he would surprise her with gifts that cost him hours of overtime work. Every argument ended with him apologizing and promising to do better, regardless of who was actually at fault. He measured the success of their relationship by her happiness. When she smiled, he felt like a good man. When she was upset, he felt like a failure. His entire identity became organized around being the kind of boyfriend who could keep her satisfied. He stopped seeing his friends because they interfered with date nights. He stopped pursuing his interests because they took time away from her. He became a satellite orbiting her emotional planet with no gravitational center of his own. And what was she doing during these 3 years? She was testing the limits of his devotion, seeing how much she could demand without giving, discovering whether he had any boundaries she couldn't cross, finding out if there was any part of himself he wouldn't sacrifice for her approval. The relationship ended predictably when she met someone who didn't worship her, someone who had his own life, his own priorities, his own sense of worth that didn't require her validation, someone who wasn't trying to earn love through service. She was drawn to what she couldn't control, and she discarded what she had trained to be controllable. He spent months wondering what he had done wrong, replaying every argument, every moment of tension, looking for the mistake that cost him her love. But he had made only one mistake, and it was believing that love could be earned through surrender, that devotion was the same as attractiveness, that being useful was the same as being valued. Contrast this with another man I knew who understood something fundamental about human nature. When women tested him, he didn't scramble to pass. He observed the test, recognized it for what it was, and either declined to participate or participated on his own terms. When they withdrew affection to manipulate his behavior, he didn't chase. He remained present to himself and allowed them to experience the natural consequences of their choices. He didn't punish, retaliate, or create counter-drama. He simply refused to be controlled by the threat of emotional withdrawal. And something interesting happened. The women who were primarily interested in Control lost interest and moved on to easier targets, but the women who were actually interested in connection were intrigued by his groundedness and emotional independence. This man understood that attraction is not created through servitude, it's created through self-possession, through having a life worth sharing rather than a void that needs filling, through being interested rather than interesting, present rather than performing, grounded rather than reactive. The difference between these two men wasn't that one was more romantic than the other, it was that one understood the difference between love and transaction, between connection and control, between generosity and servitude. One was trying to buy love with his energy, the other was offering genuine connection from a place of wholeness. What happens when you finally wake up to this reality, when you stop participating in the romantic marketplace and start insisting on authentic connection, initially theirs resistance, the women who were attracted to your utility disappear, the social circle that profited from your romantic spending starts pressuring you to be more romantic. You're accused of being cold, selfish, afraid of intimacy. But something else happens too. You begin to remember who you are when you're not performing for approval. You reconnect with interests, goals, and relationships that you had abandoned in service of romantic theater. You develop what the existentialists called authentic existence, a life lived from your own center rather than an orbit around someone else's needs. And paradoxically, this authenticity becomes deeply attractive to people who are actually capable of love rather than just interested in being loved. When you stop chasing people worth catching, become curious about why you're not chasing. When you stop being available on demand, your presence becomes valuable rather than assumed. Søren Kierkegaard wrote that truth is subjectivity, that the most important truths are not objective facts but lived experiences that transform how you see reality. The truth I'm sharing with you is not just an intellectual idea, it's a lived realization that will change everything about how you approach relationships, how you value yourself, and how you spend your precious time on this earth. Real love, not the counterfeit sold in movies and songs, but actual love is not a performance, it's not a transaction, it's not a test to be passed or a game to be won. Real love is what happens when two people who are already whole choose to share their wholeness, when two people who already know who they are decide to discover who they might become together. This kind of love doesn't require grand gestures because it finds meaning in ordinary moments. It doesn't need expensive props because the people involved are interesting enough to sustain each other's attention. It doesn't create dependency because both people maintain their individual identities while choosing to interweave their lives. But this kind of love is only possible when you refuse to participate in the romantic marketplace, when you stop trying to buy affection with sacrifice, when you stop measuring your worth through someone else's satisfaction, when you become so grounded in your own value that you can't be manipulated by the threat of withdrawal. This means learning to say no to tests disguised as needs, no to drama disguised as passion, no to manipulation disguised as love. It means developing the strength to walk away from anything that requires you to betray yourself to maintain it. It means understanding that a relationship that survives only through your constant effort is not a relationship worth Having, most importantly, it means reclaiming your time, energy, and attention as sacred resources that should be invested wisely rather than spent desperately. Your life force is not an unlimited resource to be squandered on people who see you as a utility. Your emotional availability is not a public service to be provided on demand. Your love is not a commodity to be exchanged for approval. Are you listening? Are you finally ready to stop being the man who gives everything and receives crumbs? Are you ready to stop being the entertainer in someone else's emotional theater? Are you ready to discover what happens when you become unavailable for exploitation disguised as romance? Because here's what I know from walking through this fire myself. On the other side of romantic disillusionment is something far more valuable than the love you thought you wanted. It's self-possession, it's unshakable inner peace, it's the quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you're worth, regardless of who does or doesn't recognize that worth. When you stop seeking validation through romantic success, you become truly free, free to pursue relationships that enhance your life rather than consuming it, free to love from choice rather than neediness, free to walk away from anything that diminishes you. And this freedom, this sovereignty over your own emotional life, is the most attractive quality you can develop. The women worth